Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ginnie Graham Show. I'm here with Tulsa Mayor Monroe Nichols. Always thankful and appreciative of the time you give me each month. We'll just jump in. It's about public safety right now. You had a press conference yesterday. We've had some tragic things, some shootings happen recently. One of the big things that come out of that is an ordinance. So the ordinance is that the city council is going to vote on being discussed is within the IDL. Youth 17 or under, 18 or under will have a curfew at 9 o'clock. And my question is, how did that come about? Why was this sort of the thing to bubble up the top as you're talking to counselors about what can be done right
Yeah,
now?
I mean, I would say there's a couple things that bubble to the top. I don't think we can look at the curfew as really in a vacuum. I mean, we also have stood up a task force that's going to go after folks who we know have a kind of a propensity to, cause gun violence, right? So, like, I think that's a really big part of it. I think the curfew certainly is something that's significant, but it's been a conversation at the council for some time now. The question was, how quickly could we get it done? And that's come out of conversations over the last several weeks, actually, with business owners and a lot of other folks, because of really the number of young people who are hanging kind of outside of bars, who aren't old enough to get in the bars, but just hanging out outside late at night, really giving us an opportunity to do crowd control in some ways, right? I think that's a big part of it, making sure that we can, with the dedicated force numbers that we have, make sure we have ways in which we can thin out some of those crowds. I don't know why somebody under the age of 18 needs to be hanging outside of bars at midnight, but I know it does cause for a lot of safety concerns, whether that be from some of those ones we've seen recently or frankly from traffic accidents and things like that. It also is predicated on what a lot of cities our size have done to be able to address that issue. So it hasn't been just something that we kind of thought about in response to the shootings, but it is something that we think will make things a tremendous amount safer in the event that you have those kind of issues. But I think also we should ask ourselves, is it appropriate for kids who are under the age of 18 to be hanging out outside of bars downtown Tulsa late at night? And as the parent of a 17-year-old, I'm not sure that I'd be too sad if he was not permitted to be in downtown without me, without his mom, without his grandmother present into the late night hours.
So this is something, and we have a youth curfew on the books right now. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, the downtown bar owners were asking for enforcement of the curfew. They were asking for more help. And at the time, when I talked to the police spokesperson and the chief spoke in meetings with these business owners, they said that the curfew was largely unenforceable because you can't tell by looking at a group how old they are. So they'd have to go up, and that could be viewed as targeting or harassing, that they're usually dispersed by that time, and that it would take away from other areas of the city, and they don't have resources to do that, or it would cost a lot of overtime. So that was the answer 2 or 3 weeks ago. So what makes this enforceable now when back then it wasn't?
Yeah, so I mean, we've actually, in addition to the task force that's going to be going after violent shooters, we've also stood up a little curfew team that's going to be going around letting young people know, hey, curfew is, you got an hour, you got 30 minutes, you got 20 minutes. So it's I think everything's a matter of making sure that you're dedicating the appropriate folks to do things that are priorities. The reality is we can't do everything all across town, and anybody who thinks that we can is just wrong. It's just not true. But we know we have an issue downtown. We know we have to be a little more focused on making sure we're thinning out some of those crowds. And so, yeah, there's an opportunity cost to that, right? It's the same thing as we think about homelessness or anything else. You have to prioritize and dedicate resources to places that have seen challenges. That's part of the job we have to do and weighing those things. And so, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some times where How it gets enforced is going to be maybe it could be tough. But I don't think like we're not in the business of because something is tough, we don't do it. That we don't have that luxury. I think we have to continue to find the best ways to protect young people and protect everybody else. I don't think that, to be honest, I don't think that comes simply with an ordinance. But the ordinance does give us the ability to make sure that we're actively engaging folks and make sure that if they do appear to be young, they need to move on. I go to bars all the time. I used to go a little bit more before I was mayor, and I get excited when people ask for my ID. It hadn't happened in a long time. So just as non-threatening as it is for a bartender or a waitress to ask for my ID, I don't think that it is too terribly impossible if we were trying to make sure that we're kind of protecting young folks and thinning out crowds. That you could, people could inquire about that as well. These are not things that are unheard of. Now, I will say there's a tremendous amount of concern with making sure that nobody is targeted. But I mean, Jenny, you may be different than I am. Like I said, I am oftentimes very much pleased when somebody believes me to be younger than I am. So I believe this will run smoothly, and if it doesn't, everything that we do is on body cameras. If we hear concerns about challenges that we're having, we'll deal with them. But I'm not in a place right now where I'm saying, no, we shouldn't do something that we believe might help save people's lives, that we believe might help get people out of a bad situation, or frankly, we believe that, again, it's a value statement. Do we really think that kids under the age of 18 should be hanging out in places that maybe they're not old enough to get into after hours? I just don't think that's a good idea right now. And I think we have enough evidence and data to show us that maybe a different pathway forward is important.
So, but why now? I think is my question, because
Have
some
you
of
been
the,
downtown on a Saturday night?
well, no, it's just the bar
Outside
owners
of
were
bars?
asking for a while. We need help with the
Yeah,
crowd control. We need help with this.
yeah.
I mean,
I think
why did it take?
it's well it's been they've been debating and kicking around for a while. I mean, like this is something that the council's been working on. I think advancing it a little bit quicker than maybe it would have happened is fine, but this is not it wasn't an idea that just happened just now. I mean, I think that we're starting to see more and more evidence that maybe this is something we should put a priority on. I think the council actually has 2 Wednesdays next month where they're not meeting because of the 4th of July and something else. So when you just look at the calendar and you look at something that's been debated for a while, I think the thinking was actually this Wednesday is the best time to do it given the council calendar coming up in the next couple of weeks. And so the why now or whatever, I mean, that's an appropriate question, but I think everybody knows why now. I don't think that I think everybody's kind of clear, like, why is this a priority, more of a priority now than it was? I don't know what other answer to give you other than, like, I think we've seen the evidence of what's happened downtown. And we know we've been debating this for a while. If you look at the council calendar, the 4th of July, I think is it next week? Is that right?
I think so.
So that means there's not a council meeting. So that means it wouldn't
What
happen
about
next
some of
week.
the other ideas that have been thrown out? Like they were talking about these surface parking lots that are largely
Those are things we're also working on.
okay.
I mentioned yesterday the 883 guns that have been illegal guns that have been taken. Some of those have been taken off cars and parking lots. So, we have been working to address those issues as well. We continue to work on those things. Just because we only announced the curfew and the other things don't mean those are the only things that we're doing. We're actively working on a number of other different angles. Some of those parking lots are privately owned. We're working with those parking lot owners to make sure that we can address those issues. So we're also actually doing that. You don't pull nearly 900 legal guns off the streets by not doing things like making sure that we're policing parking lots and other things like that.
Well, but it's also being able to get the owners of those lots to put lights on there
Sure,
to maybe
sure,
put
sure.
some
And that's
barriers up.
100%. And so, like, those are things we're actively working on as well. It's just, it wasn't a part of the announcement yesterday because there's no official council action on that.
Okay.
But between the Commissioner of Public Safety, I know Councilor Gilbert's been a part of a lot of those parking lot conversations. We actually have a couple of owners that have done a really good job of lighting who are good models about doing that kind of stuff. And then making sure we're being very vigilant about, kind of what's going on. The other thing that, we are going to start pressing is making sure people think about like airport rules. You see an unattended bag, that type of deal, right? So I think there's a number of things that you'll see that will continue to enhance public safety. The curfew is one of them, but it's not the only thing that we're working on right now, and it's not the only thing that we've been doing. I mean, I I also go back to the fact that the two more high profile events that we've had downtown, the shooting outside of Reds, the shooting on Greenwood on Saturday, all happened, within feet of a law enforcement official. Um, so it's also not that we don't have police downtown, right? But the reality is there's a lot of people who don't necessarily have the best decision making uh, uh, um, uh, about them who have powerful weapons. And we've got to get those off the street. We've been very aggressive about it. We got to get those people off the street. And then we got to work with the young people who are kind of on the periphery. But there's a lot of people who are willing to make really, really bad decisions in crowds that have weapons that they shouldn't have. And we've been really aggressive about getting them off the streets. And as I said before, we've been in close proximity every single time there's been a shooting.
So explain to me a little bit about what this task force is going to do differently that the police weren't doing before, because the description of the task force, from what I was listening to yesterday, is bringing all these different divisions together and to see who's committing the crimes and why committing the crimes. I would assume that some of that was already being done.
Yeah.
So
So I
what does this task force do that wasn't?
so I'll give you this example. If you got one police officer who's enforcing traffic violations on the Broken Arrow Expressway, you're going to catch a number of people speeding. If you have 25 of them who are enforcing traffic violations on the Broken Arrow Expressway, you're going to get a whole bunch more of them. So it's mainly a deployment of resources through several agencies really focused on those folks who cause crime. We've done these kind of things before. Any task force is developed that way. Um, but the reality is, if you look at the entire year, most of our crime statistics, particularly violent crime, is down. So you haven't necessarily had the need to have that many people focused on that kind of an effort. We have that need now. It's way more active. It's way more dynamic. Even with the, as was saying before, you don't, we've taken 900 illegal guns off the street. So like, again, it's not so much that we're doing things we've never thought of before. It is the amount of resources we're deploying to handle those things in the most aggressive way possible. This is a big city. We got a lot of things to do from a law enforcement perspective. This is about putting more of those resources to the strategies that we work to make sure we're catching people who are shooters and getting them off the street.
Okay. So I had a question about you. We've talked about gun violence and then teens. Are they necessarily teens involved in these shootings? Or when you refer to youth violence, are you referring to like other crimes that we're seeing just more youth violence in? You mentioned trespassing and nuisance complaints, things like that. So I want to be able to delineate, are the teenagers committing the homicides and the shootings, or are you referring to other?
There are a significant number of teens that are involved in these shootings and these homicides and the ongoing feuds between different groups. So yes, I'm referring to the violent crime that we're seeing
Okay.
is large, is not exclusively teenagers, for the record, but there's such a focus on it because when I look at the reports that I get, there are too many ones in front of the other number. And so we're talking 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. Certainly there's some folks who are in their 20s as well. But the bulk of the names that I see are all kids that were born in or after the year my kid was born, and he's 17 years old.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of shift a little bit to, you mentioned the Office of Children and Families, which I always thought had great potential. And it gets to my ever growing frustration as far as inequities in the city for what kids have access to.
Sure.
And, 2 years ago, Georgetown University did a study in Tulsa asking kids, why are you involved in crimes? And it was like one of those, like, duh, like they don't have an adult in their life.
Yep.
And even when they have an adult in their life and they get to an activity, they have no money to
That's right.
participate in the camp, the sport, the fine art. And then they don't have opportunities for jobs. So, and I have to admit, in my job, I get calls all the time from like private schools and people I know for an internship or a day of shadowing, and I don't get that from other parts of the city, from public schools.
Yeah.
So, and it's a huge frustration, and I can't blame the schools, although Dr. Johnson knows I have some ideas, but these great inequities, I think your office can do something about. And so I'm wondering, at this point, you've talked about you're bringing people together, but what tangible things do you see that can bubble up that by the end of the year we can offer a free tennis club or a free whatever? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. I
there's
mean,
some
that's a big,
things that you can
that's
do.
100% part of, what we're trying to figure. How can we pull our resources to make sure that we're all spending them in a way that we can create those opportunities for kids? I had the East Central flag football team, when they won their championship last year, came to visit me. And I asked them, if there's any advice you have for me as mayor, what would be the advice that you'd have for me? And they said, we need safe places to go to do things that didn't cost money.
Right.
Yeah. So to your point, right?
Right,
And
right. That's exactly what they say
like,
over and over
but
again.
of course you do. The number of kids who go hang out outside downtown probably is greatly reduced if they have other places to go, right? So I think you hit the nail on the head. And I do think the Office of Children and Families is a place in which we can figure out how to get that done. Like between our Parks Department, the resources at TPS from the facility standpoint. But I do think we all have to speak with one voice and what those look like, and we don't try to do our own little small part to create a very small opportunity that can be a place for 5 kids. There's a time and place for that too, but we do need to focus on some larger scale investments that give kids a place to go, an opportunity, and a place where they can actually connect. You mentioned on the job front, but also on the access to higher education or technical training skills or whatever. It is really hard if you've never had, if you don't have somebody in your life kind of directing you that way at
Right.
all. But if even that person that's in your life never ever had that experience either, even if they're working hard or whatever, maybe they don't know what applications are like and how do you get yourself into Tulsa Tech or TCC or the University of Tulsa or wherever the case may be. And I do think we have to do a lot of work around expanding kids' horizons, but that's the reason why that is there, right? So we can figure out what is our unified agenda working with the young people, because young people are actually part of the children's cabinet as well. What are the investments that we have to make to get there? Part of the deal is also making sure, because the question I get oftentimes, and I always get really frustrated that I don't have a better answer because we just haven't. I mean, we've been here for a good amount of time. Seems like longer than 7 months. We've been here for 7 months. Is for the people who ask what they can do. And that's why yesterday we said, hey, if you want to be a part of it, just to begin to find ways to plug into the lives of these young people, resilient at city-of-tulsa.org is where we're asking people to email and just say, like, hey, me, my church group, my civic group, we want to get involved in the lives of these kids. One big priority I have right now are the kids who are on the periphery of some of these folks who we might pick up as we're searching for violent criminals. Everybody had a lot of people have a mentor, not all of them are good, and so like those are a priority group of kids for me. But building out beyond that, young people have said over and over again what they need, and we got to begin doing the hard work, but important work connecting those opportunities. So I do think that is the forum for it. It's one of the reasons why that's why one of the reasons I was so passionate about the Office of Children and Families, because I know it's not reasonable, and if it was, it would be done already, to say that the mayor and the superintendent are going to meet and we're going to figure all this out. No, we need a number of people to come in. We need to create the forum we're having the conversation about it, and then we need to have people who are willing to make budgetary decisions on how to create those opportunities. And that's the Office of Children and Families is working on right now.
I just feel like Tulsa has all the elements. They're just
Oh,
spread out.
100%.
And I look at like what the Tulsa, and I've mentioned the Tulsa Debate League. That's just a
Yeah.
group that they came in 2013.
Yep.
Only Booker T. Washington had a debate team. Since
Yep.
since then, every school has one. Now they're in elementary and middle schools, and we've got kids that are bringing back state national championships that never would have learned that skill, that
100%.
are now getting scholarships based on something that it was just a niche. And I use that as an example of we have people who are able to do these things if we just had, and maybe that's where this office comes in,
Yeah, and I
because
think that
that naturally creates mentorships and job
well, and
opportunities.
the other thing is that, we have a place where people who have energy to do things can go to figure out how to be plugged in. I think there's also a lot of people who also don't know where to go whether it be with their idea or their resources. And so we got to figure out a way to harness all of that. Because I think you're right. I mean, you know, years ago, I think this is maybe when I was at Impact Tulsa, maybe when I was working in City Hall as a staffer. I remember being taken by Union Public Schools and their commitment to create an extracurricular opportunity for every student that went there. Didn't mean they had to play sports. If some kid was interested in chess, they create a chess club. So there could be a place for kids to go. I think we have to take that same kind of attitude and give a sense of community to a lot of young people who don't have it. I'll say this, and this is not the question that you asked, but I think it is somewhat related. Back when I was a staffer in the mayor's office, we had worked to create 18 after school programs across the city. And I went to a press conference that Mayor Taylor was coming to speak to announce these after school programs. She's probably not going to like that I mentioned this, but she had a Prius at the time that somehow ran out of gas. The only person I've ever known to have a hybrid car that ran out of gas, but neither here nor there. But so I'm trying to kill time at this press conference with these kids are in the room. There's probably 30, 40 kids in the room. And I remember asking them a question about like, what's your favorite animal, right? And kids are yelling out their favorite animal. And this is at Hawthorne Elementary School in North Tulsa. And I remember asking them, how many of you been to the zoo? And I assumed that every hand was going to go in the air because the zoo is like 2 miles east of there,
Right.
3 miles east of there. And only about 20% of the hands went in the air. And it has always been a reflection of mine that for a lot of our young people of no fault of their own, the world is just small and we have to work to expand it. I have to say, on when I learned of the shooting on Saturday, one of my reflections, and I'm sorry I'm taking up all your time on stuff you didn't ask me about, was that the Thursday before, which was June 19th, I spoke in American Airlines, and then I left for U.S. Conference of Mayors for a couple of days. And I remember talking about the context and where we were sitting. 1862, Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. It's effective January 1st, 1863, not enforced in Texas until June 19th of 1865. And then we fast forward all those years and we have Tulsa, the home of the Greenwood District, which against all odds was built. And somehow along the way, young people in this community, when we should be celebrating who we are, don't see the humanity in kids who look just like you. And we've really had a big miss. We've really missed out, but doesn't mean we can't correct it. And so this inability to see the humanity in other people, even those who look like you. Like there's been a whole debate about not seeing the humanity of people who look different, but not seeing the humanity of people who look like you is something that I've thought about ever since then. The vision of this place we just recently talked about looking like a war zone with so many cop cars down there because of young people who should see not only the value in each other, but the power and what they could mean collectively in an area that proved it one time in our history. It's something that I've thought about a lot and I continue to think about. And certainly on one end, hurts me deeply, but also kind of fuels the fire with us understanding we've got to do better. And it starts with just helping young people in particular discover their humanity and the humanity of the people around them, where they look like them or not. Something that was lost on those young folks Saturday night downtown Tulsa.
Well, we certainly agree on that. I just say the inequities among kids is so real. I mean, even just
100%.
getting a driver's license. I
Oh my
know
goodness.
a lot of kids who drove illegally because they could not afford the schools can't offer it and they can't afford the classes. So what do?
Yeah.
They make
Well,
a bad decision, but
I mean,
we
Jenny,
can fix that.
that's the reality. I mean, like you're mentioning something that's really true, and I'll say, based on everything I've seen, it is much easier to get a gun than it is a driver's license
Yes,
for
yes,
like
absolutely. And
it
that's
is so much easier to do those things than to be on the straight and narrow. And some of it is resilience. Like it should be hard to get through life, but it shouldn't be that hard. We can make a
right.
whole lot of things easier. We can make sure that there's role models that kids have so they can see a pathway. When I was 17 years old, 16 years old, my mom was phenomenal. I had a phenomenal family. it's still really hard when you're that young to actually know what a future is. Like, I mean, you just don't, you have no real concept of it. You haven't lived life. And I remember I relied on the advice of my grandparents. Sometimes my mom didn't always see eye to eye, but my grandparents lived more life than anybody. And I was able to rely on the advice of them, and not everybody has that. And it's not their fault, but they're making some of them, not all of them, very small minority of them, in fact, are making decisions that are impacting not only the safety of other young people, but the safety of everybody. But it's also they're throwing away their own lives. And I just, it's hard to sit with that as a mayor and feel comfortable or feel like you are doing a good job when that kind of stuff happens. I tell you, I mentioned it yesterday. I told folks to hold me accountable. That doesn't just mean when things are going well or when we're cutting ribbons and we all feel great. It means in times like these. And I think about that level of accountability I have. It's the reason why we've stood up the task forces. It's the reason why the curfew ordinance that had already been worked on, but has been accelerated, not because we think we have all the perfect answers, but we know we have some of them, and we're going to work them. We're going to see if they work, and if they don't work, we won't do them. But if they are working, then we're going to continue to work on them, and we're going to do all the other things we need to do because I do believe in accountability. I do believe it is my job to make sure we turn this stuff around. And it's something that I'm going to work on as hard as I can. We have a great team here. We have great members of the community. Our job is to make sure we pull all that stuff together, and we're going to do our job.
Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you for having kids on in your office, because we have one of the best things I think we did here was we have a Tulsa World Youth Advisory Board. They're fantastic. I
Do you
love working
really?
with teenagers. Yes, I mean, I love that we have kids that come from affluent country club homes and kids that are taking the public transportation to the office. I mean, they're just
Isn't that
get
just a
them
great
together.
perspective?
Excuse me?
Just the perspective of those kids and then what those kids learn from each other. Like they're going to be
Oh,
such different adults as they get older.
it's the best thing, and that three came through Tulsa Change Makers, kind of helped me start it,
Yep.
and it's been
Amazing.
the best experience I've been able to see unfold. So I'm glad you're doing that. I also, going to your accountability and transparency, I hope that holds true when we start asking for police data to
Sure.
check that, because if we have problems getting police data, I'm going to come to you. So, deal?
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
I will say, I know there have been issues. Some of those things are because, we don't just have man kind of force problems on the streets. We also have them with pulling things.
Mhm.
But there is nothing that we have to hide, and I'd be happy to do whatever I can should
Okay.
we run into some.
Okay. Well, I
I
want
got
to give
nothing
you
to
the
hide,
last
man.
word. Thank you
Hmm?
for your time. I know we spent 30 minutes talking, so I just
Sorry.
want to give you the last word on anything that you just want to make a point to make.
I mean, I think I said it earlier, and I think the big thing is that, I know I have the accountability to help get us on the other side to make sure we're prepared as a city to get on the other side of some of the issues that we see in our streets, for sure, and how we work with people young and old to make sure we begin to mitigate those challenges. But I do believe that it also is a big part of us how we come together as a community to get it done. I have some of the answers. I am excited to implement some of the things that are going to get us there. But at the end of the day, it's going to take every last one of us in some way, shape, or form. And so I hope people lean in. It does not mean that you have to agree with me. It don't mean you got to support me or even vote for me. But if you care about our young people and you want to get involved, no matter from what perspective you get involved in them, I encourage you to email resilient@city-of-tulsa.org. I encourage you to continue to pour into young people. And I think if we do that, our city's going to be much better off. We'll get through this just like we get through everything. We'll be much better on the other side of it. The other thing I'll say at the very end is that for everybody who has been around these events where folks have been victimized to gun violence, I want you to know that I'm thinking about you. Certainly for the families who have lost somebody to gun violence, certainly praying for you. And we're going to do our job to make sure that things get not only a lot better from these individual events by taking people off the streets who would threaten public safety, but we also are going to be a community that lets young people know that we care about them. We wrap our arms around them, and let them know that their greatest future that they could ever possibly have can be right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll meet again in 3 or 4 weeks and we'll get an update then. So I appreciate it.
See you later.
Thank you.